Hello and welcome to the Oak Spring podcast, where we celebrate the legacy of Mrs. Bunny Mellon through the work of the Oak Spring Garden Foundation. I'm Chris Stafford and this is Season 3, Episode 6. On this month's episode, we'll be talking to Dr. Sylvain Cordier, who is the Paul Mellon Curator and Head of the Department of European Art at the Virginia Museum of Fine Art in Richmond. We'll be highlighting the collaboration between Dr. Sylvain Cordier and Tiffany Co. Sylvain has been working with the Oak Spring Library Collection and the archives to develop an exhibition showcasing the exceptional jewellery collection designed by Jean Schlumberger, the iconic French jewellery designer known for his creations for Tiffany Co. for Mrs. Bunny Mellon. The jewellery was the result of a close personal relationship between the designer and Mrs. Mellon, and now the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts holds many of these historic pieces. And Tiffany Co. have launched a new collection of jewellery inspired by these pieces. And later on in the podcast, we'll be hearing from our Director of Programs, Danielle Eady, who has an update, of course, of everything that's happening here at Oak Spring, as always. But first, I'm joined by our guest, Dr. Sylvain Cordier. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. Good morning. It's such a real pleasure to be with you this morning.
Let's start with a little bit of background that brought you to this place.
Absolutely. So I've have this pleasure of being the Paul Mellon Curator at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and the Paul Mellon Curator at the museum is also the chair of the Department of European Art. And I've been there for 7 years, coming from the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, where I was curator of decorative arts before that. And it's through very exciting collaborations between the Montreal Museum and VMFA that I discovered VMFA. And so when the time came back in 2019, I was very happy to apply for the position of Paul Mellon Curator in Virginia, and was fortunate and honored to get that position, which was an opportunity for me to discover the absolutely extraordinary collection of Jean Schlumberger jewelry that the museum holds as part of the Mellon collection. The Mellon collection goes at VMFA in different directions. That aspect of the Mellon collection, the Schlumberger jewelry, was when I arrived, I think not the most famous part of that collection. I've been trying to really work on making people aware of how unique, how extraordinary it is, and how fortunate we are to have it.
Can you in some way describe the collection for us?
So the Mellon collection itself, so it's mostly composed in four parts, I should say. It's an extraordinary collection of British sporting art, which was very much the taste of Paul Mellon. Paul Mellon being, over the course of the 20th century, one of the most important American horse breeders in Oak Spring in particular. And he had, as an art collector, an absolute passion for English art. He was American British, and had this absolute passion for British art, and in particular for sporting art, 18th and 19th century sporting art. So that's an aspect which we have in the collection. And then with Bunny Mellon, his second wife, they collected together a wonderful ensemble, actually one of the most important ensemble in the world of French Impressionist and Post-Impressionist art. And that's the second aspect of their collection. Part of it we have at VMFA. The other part, and I have to say the most important part, in fact, went eventually to the National Gallery of Art, which, as you probably know, was very much the Mellon cause, created, inspired by the vision of Paul's father, Andrew Mellon. So I usually talk about us at VMFA as the sort of, as far as the Mellon collection is concerned, as the little sister to the National Gallery. The third aspect is an extraordinary collection of works on paper, and which cover basically both, so works on paper, drawings and prints, which reflect the interest of Paul and Bunny Mellon for both the British sporting art and Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. And the fourth part of the collection is this extraordinary collection of jewelry and objets d'art, gold objects by Jean Schlumberger, which were the result of this one-of-a-kind friendship that developed between Bunny Mellon and Jean Schlumberger in the 1950s and 60s in particular.
How are the pieces chosen, Sylvain?
The Schlumberger pieces?
Yes.
Yeah, so they were, the most important ones were direct, bespoke commissions placed by Mrs. Mellon, which sort of document their, the constant interactions between Bunny Mellon and Jean Schlumberger. They talk, they write to each other, they meet each other in New York, in France, and in Oak Spring, and talk constantly about how Schlumberger's creativity can be inspired by Mrs. Mellon's very particular vision of nature, of gardening, of celebration of life and the beauty of nature in particular. So the most, I think, iconic pieces are direct commissions. And then Mrs. Mellon, as a client of Jean Schlumberger first and very quickly, they sort of really created a bond in 1955 and in 1956, in fact, Jean Schlumberger integrates Tiffany and Company as a vice president and head of high jewelry. And so Mrs. Mellon then became kind of one of the most important clients, and actually I think the most important client of his salon at Tiffany. And so she would very, very regularly come and visit Tiffany and buy a lot of things that were not directly designed for her, but that she appreciated and wanted to collect. Wanted also to buy to make gifts to friends and relatives. There's a very important aspect of her patronage, the sponsorship of Schlumberger, which consisted in creating or collecting gifts for people who mattered to her very much, and then eventually but I hope we'll have an opportunity to go into more detail about that. But there's a whole aspect of their creative relationship, which translated in the making, and that's more in the 1960s, in the making of one-of-a-kind sculptural objects in gold, enamel, and precious stones that she sort of offered the opportunity for Schlumberger to let loose with his creativity to create absolutely extraordinary sculptural pieces.
What else can you tell us about that?
Well, it's interesting. It's the sort of final or sort of conclusive chapter of, in my opinion, so I've been now for several years working on Schlumberger's career and life, and although he actually died in Paris in 1987, his creative parcours, his creative career kind of really comes to a spectacular conclusion in the 1960s with that project, with this project that the Paul and Bunny Mellon, of course, mostly, but very much supported by Paul, at the same time, offering him the possibility to go beyond wearable jewelry for the most important part of his career, which really brought fame to Jean Schlumberger in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, where his creations of wearable jewelry for the Cafe Society, a cosmopolitan community of jewelry lovers in America and in Europe mostly. And at some point, it's very clear that in the late 50s, which corresponds to the moment where he's the closest to Bonnie Mellon, he expresses the fact that he's probably inspired to making sort of more important, more over-the-top creations than just wearable jewelry. And that may sound kind of crazy to say it this way, but I think that's very much the idea there. Like there's with Jean Schlumberger, there's always this aim or sort of hope to confront his own 20th century modernist vision of jewelry to older sources and references that borrow from 16th century Mannerist traditions, Baroque tradition of so in the 17th century of objets d'art made of gold and jewels, of little, I mean, not necessarily little, but like very spectacular creative objects that would dress and decorate chimney pieces or tables of princes from the 16th, 17th, and 18th century. And this is very much something that all along his life as a creator, Jean Schlumberger admired very much. And you can feel that at the very end of the 1950s, he confesses to Bonnie Mellon that he has more to do, more to offer than just, if I may say so, just making rings and brooches and necklaces. And it's very interesting because Bonnie's response was like, well, let's work on this. Like if you have, she had so much admiration and trust in the fact that he was one of the most important, interesting, stimulating artists of his time, that she's like, well, let's conceive a program where my husband and I will support you and place commissions for absolutely one of a kind, unique series of objects, and that led to what the Schlumberger team called Operation Object. Starting in 1959, ending in 1971, and resulting in about 10 series of pieces, which sort of, every year, every 2 years, there's a new commission, and Schlumberger thinks about what he wants to do, talks with Mr. Mellon very much about Mrs. and Mr. Mellon very much about his vision for each object. And we're very fortunate that all of these objects are in our collection at VMFA today. They're on view for the public to admire, and they're an extraordinary journey throughout the 1960s and the creativity of this man at the moment of postmodern contemporary art, the birth of contemporary art. We have this sort of completely different, absolutely fascinating way of talking about what the 1960s were through extraordinary pieces. We have a series of 6 Black Amour busts. We have an extraordinary golden palm tree. We have 2 amazing birds. Everything made of gold. Everything completely over the top. Everything's connecting references, as I was saying, to Baroque art of the 17th century, but reinterpreted through the lens of surrealism. Schlumberger was a great admirer and friend of Salvador Dali, for instance. And I think it's really what, in my opinion, I think what make our collection absolutely unique is this collection of this ensemble within the collection of wearable jewelry, this ensemble of one of a kind objects that document the friendship, document the trust, and the most amazing example of postmodern patronage, I think, to an artist like Schlumberger.
Well, that leads me nicely to the question of their vision, because their collaboration clearly formed this wonderful vision, if you will, well beyond their personal connection to the greater public possibilities that they had by combining their resources. What do you take from that, Sylvain, if you were to highlight the vision that they had with this collaboration?
I love the fact that the more I think, I've thought about it a lot, and what I found extremely touching and wonderful is that these two people met and bonded at a moment each of them needed a best friend and someone to really offer the companionship to express who they really were at moments when probably they couldn't. For Mrs. Mellon, it's the fact of actually becoming Mrs. Mellon with a lot of pressure from her family, from the responsibility, the social responsibility, imposed on someone who always was a rather discreet character. And for Schlumberger, it's an ongoing series of doubts about and a sort of expression of his own fragility and discretion as well. I think he was also an extremely discreet person who lives always kind of wondered about what his place is in the world, whether he belongs to America, whether he belongs to France as a designer, and who had lost, I think, important people in his life in the years before meeting and befriending Mrs. Mellon. And so I like that moment that they bonded very much in 1955. They knew each other before that, but the bond and the friendship really started in January 1955 and developed into something absolutely extraordinary. They met each other, they needed each other, and they very quickly turned that friendship into commissions, into creativity. And that started with wearable pieces of jewelry as early as 1956, which were over the top pieces of wearable jewelry. I'm thinking brooches and necklaces, which in fact for Mrs. Mellon were very early on things that she commissioned not so much to wear them than to collect them and to look at them in the privacy of her life, of her personal life. I mean, she was not very fond of social life. She participated, of course, to cafe society events in the 50s and 60s, but there's no moment where by opposition with, or by contrast with some of the most important clients of Schlumberger, other clients of Schlumberger at the time, who are very much members of Cafe Society, of New York Cafe Society. I'm thinking about Babe Paley, for instance, who lived through social life and were extremely defined publicly by their belonging to social life. Mrs. Mellon is a very much more private individual, so her collecting jewelry is more the result of a personal admiration, a personal interest in looking at the beauty of items that she collected, rather than showing them off to the public, to magazine life or etc. I think there's a fantastic meeting that happened between the two, and where they immediately bonded over creativity, over his creativity, and how his creativity would reflect her own sense of discretion, of private life. And of course, when talking about Mrs. Mellon, private life involves the garden and the development of the garden, and the way the jewelry she commissions kind of reflect themselves, or kind of find their logic into how much they are part of her celebration of nature, of plants, of flowers, is always, I think, very admirable to notice.
We've touched a little bit on this earlier, Sylvain, but can you explain a little bit more about where the catalyst for this new collection emerged from?
The catalyst, I think, was very much. It's very much nature, and it's a very spiritual perspective on nature, which I think I assume rather quickly arrived in their conversation when they start really befriending each other and kind of trying to learn about each other and who they are and why they bond so well and why they understand so well. I think both of them had a sense that whatever your wealth, whatever your position in life and society, you're just one item of a global world, and it's a creation. There's a very deeply spiritual aspect of that, and it's a spirituality that's rooted into Christianity, but not, as far as Schlumberger is concerned, not only that. And Schlumberger has traveled extensively to Asia, to Center Asia, and he has had a very deep interest in world culture and the way the different cultures of the world and spiritualities of the world think about humankind being part of one world, one creation, one global creation, and Jean Schlumberger very much believes that we are one element within a hierarchy of forces onto one planet, and that this has to be celebrated, expressed, and reflected through creativity. And his means of creativity after the war becomes very clearly jewelry, and so that's how he tries to express and to reveal some of those philosophical and spiritual perspective. And on the part of Mrs. Mellon, she grew as a gardener. She grew up as an avid, passionate gardener, and so she was herself very, very aware and passionate about the fact that that you don't grow up as a human being away from nature, from witnessing that nature grows, that seasonality defines your life and your enjoyment of being part of life and the world and nature in general. And I think they're very much bonded around that. It's very, I think very interesting to always look through the jewelry, look through the objects, how Schlumberger always tries to celebrate the forces of nature, the kind of growing energy that can be noticed when you look at a plant, when you look at a wild animal, birds in particular, butterflies, or sea life, and how this concept of organic form kind of should feed our experience of the world. That's always what I think is the most, to me, the most fascinating aspect of his creativity. And it constantly sort of mimics. Mimic is probably not a good term. It probably always kind of offers a resonance with the growing gardens of Bonnie Mellon, in particular the garden that she develops at Oak Spring from starting in the 1950s. And Schlumberger grew himself as a gardener. It's a very interesting aspect because, of course, as a designer, he reflects Bonnie Mellon's vision of nature, but he also very much learned from her about gardening. His creativity is not so much focused on flowers and plants before befriending Mrs. Mellon, and after 1955-56, it's very clear that he becomes himself an avid observer and student of nature, of gardening in particular, and she definitely played a part in that. He developed his own garden eventually in Guadeloupe, where in 59 he buys a house, and she definitely played the part in helping him grow into a gardener, which became a passion of his, definitely thanks to her.
Do you think that influenced his work as well?
Yes, absolutely, completely. Her gardening, her vision of gardening, the way that found a resonance in his own spiritual vision of life, of the presence of humankind as part of the creation, of God's creation of the earth, I think was is a very, very important aspect of his creation. He was fascinated by her expertise in gardening and how that found a sort of spiritual meaning and revealed spiritual meanings. I think it's very unquestionable that as much learning it could get from her, he would, and at the same time he would always be extremely happy to provide his own aesthetic sense and creative sense to her own development of her gardens, especially the one in Oak Spring and also the one at Antigua, where the Mellons had a house which she mostly developed in the 1960s, which was also an extraordinary garden. And so Jean Schlumberger at Oak Spring, for instance, had a huge influence on the development of the formal greenhouse, in particular, the decoration of the greenhouse. And so there's this unquestionable back and forth of exchange of ideas between them, so that as far as she's concerned, the garden she grows at Oak Spring and in Antigua reflect a spiritual experience, and at the same time, from his perspective, that the jewels that he designs also encompass or celebrates the world of nature into that spiritual vision of beauty and creativity.
Well, being so familiar now with the collection, I'm wondering if there are still any particular discoveries in these archives that you've made that have inspired you recently.
Yeah, very much. I was particularly, a lot, in fact, and I was very fortunate to be, over the course of my research, so I'm working on a book about Schlumberger, which I hope to publish next year in 2027, before eventually preparing a huge exhibition in 28, 29 about the life and career of Jean Schlumberger. And over the past years, I've been fortunate to have access to wonderful sources of archives all around the world about him. And what I have been, I think, constantly fascinated about is when he gets to talk about his creative process. And as far as Mrs. Mellon is concerned, it's true that the exchanges that they had was often rooted in conversations around pieces that she commissioned, that he wants to ensure that she will like them, that she understands his progresses and what he proposes. And on her part, it's always very moving, because she often has the same sort of uncertainty of how much he understands that she wants to help him, and often you see in the letters how they just want to make sure that each other understand what the other wants, and that the other is there to help and is there to support and celebrate the other. That, I think, the very sort of personal attachment revealed through the letters was very much the most touching discovery, I think, that I made over the course of that research.
Finally, what else would you like our listeners to take away from this impression that you've given us of the collection, Sylvain?
I think I would like people to understand, and especially talking from a Virginia perspective, I think we are extremely fortunate to have received this collection at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. The Mellon collection in general, the paintings, the Impressionist paintings, the sporting art, but the collection of jewelry by Jean Schlumberger, the result of this unique collaborative process of sponsorship, of patronage, of constant creative friendship is really one of a kind. And I keep saying that, like, to people, there's no other place in the world where you will find such a coherent, huge, rich collection of pieces by Jean Schlumberger, who now kind of, I think, publicly is more and more acknowledged as one of the most important designers of jewelry, but not only of the 20th century. So it's really, I'm absolutely amazed by Mr. and Mrs. Mellon's vision over their relationship to VMFA, that they wanted to ensure that this collection eventually would end up in a museum, that this museum would be the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and that for people to enjoy. And we always celebrate the fact that it's thanks to Paul Mellon that the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts is free of charge for the public. The access to the permanent collection is free of charge because Mr. Mellon wanted his collection to be free of charge for the people of Virginia. I mean, for the people in general, for all publics. And very early on in the 1960s, like 60, 61, so at the beginning of their friendship, Mrs. Mellon conceives the fact that wherever that collaborative journey of sponsorship with Jean Schlumberger will take them, that the collection that would result from it should eventually end up in a museum. And it's really interesting because it's through the history of the 20th century jewelry, you have a lot of extraordinary, extravagant patrons and collectors of jewelry. I can't think of really one who had that idea that eventually a collection of jewelry should end up in a museum as a coherent ensemble. Most of the time, extraordinary collections of jewelry just end up at auction when the person dies, and Mrs. Mellon really stands out as being different on that regard. She had many other jewels, and there was eventually, when she passed away, following her death in 2014, Sotheby's organized an extraordinary auction sale where the rest of her jewelry collection was auctioned as part of her estate, but the Jean Schlumberger corpus of works remained, of wearable jewelry and those one-of-a-kind objects remained as a whole, as a coherent whole, which had to be gifted to VMFA. To be preserved, to be really kept as a memory of their friendship, and I think that's quite admirable, and I'm constantly amazed and in awe to notice that we have received that gift.
What a wonderful way to memorialize their collaboration. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't let you go without giving you the opportunity to share any upcoming exhibitions that you may be having at the VMFA.
Absolutely, and I of course invite all your listeners to come visit us at the Virginia Museum. We have currently an absolutely extraordinary. It's not a project that I was involved with, but it's nonetheless absolutely spectacular exhibition about art at the court of the great Mughals, who ruled over India in the 16th through the 19th century. Absolutely stunning exhibition, and then that exhibition will be followed by a project that I am co-curating with my assistant curator, Dr. Teresa Cunningham, on a wonderful collection of Impressionist art coming from the Dallas Museum. And it's an exhibition that's opening in November of this year called The Impressionist Revolution. So it's kind of related to the Mellon taste for painting as far as Impressionism and Post-Impressionism are concerned. But we are very much looking at how revolutionary the artists of the Impressionist movement, Monet, Renoir, Sisley, Berthe Morisot, etc., how revolutionary in their time these people were, and how they sort of ignited many of the concepts that led to modern art. It's going to be a wonderful show starting in November, and which will be on view at the museum until April of next year.
Dr. Sylvain Cordier, Paul Mellon Curator and Head of the Department of European Art at the Virginia Museum of Fine Art in Richmond. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast with us this month. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much. It's been a real joy for me as well. Thank you for the invitation.
And joining me now, as always, on our monthly podcast is Danielle Eady, our Director of Programs here at Oak Spring. Danielle, how are you summering so far? Are you adjusting to the summer humidity at Oak Spring?
Yeah, we're having a beautiful summer so far. Definitely having some muggy days lately, but we did get a couple rainstorms recently. So that was very, very much appreciated by the gardens and the plants on site.
Yes, I'm sure it is. Absolutely. It's always a concern, isn't it, for this time of year when things start to get hot and we don't have enough rain. So it's all about balance, isn't it, when it comes to ecology?
Yes, absolutely.
And you've been busy. You've got a lot of things to look forward to in June.
That's right. We do have a number of events coming up in June and then into July. So one thing that we're really looking forward to is next week we will be hosting a 1-week music residency. So we have 5 musicians that are all part of a band called Merriweather String Band. That's an old-time group of musicians. They will be here for a week, living on site, having meals with our interdisciplinary residents, and they'll be composing music and working on music that they've played and practicing together. They all live up and down the East Coast, so this is a special opportunity for them to be in one place rehearsing together. And then their residency will culminate in a performance at our Summer Open Day on Saturday, June 27th. So on that note, that is another couple of big events that we're really looking forward to is our Summer Open Day tours. Those are on Friday, June 26th and Saturday, June 27th. Those are ticketed events in which we host about 500 visitors each day, and they're self-guided tours on Little Oak Spring. So guests enter by the Broodmare Barn. They walk down past the library, through the entrance of the main residence into the formal garden, and then back up to the gallery and gift shop. So all along that way, there are staff positioned to answer any questions our guests might have. And it's a really special opportunity to showcase our site, and the jewel of our site is, of course, the formal garden, so people get to spend some time there experiencing that. So that's really our focus now in June, is looking towards that those 2 open day tours.
And are those tickets available right up to the day of the first open day on June 26th, Danielle?
That's right. Tickets are available until they are sold out. So all the way up until Friday, June 26th, we will be selling those. And the tickets can be purchased on our website under programs, 1-day events, and then you'll see the open day tours, and they're timed tickets. So then you can pick what day you'd like to come and check what times are available.
And where will the performance by the Merriweather String Band take place on the property then, on the Saturday?
Oh, great question. The band will be positioned in the Broodmare Barn. So right when guests enter, they'll hear their music. They'll be playing from about 11 to 1 on Saturday, so 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So guests will be greeted by their music, and then as the guests exit, they'll also have the opportunity to hear them if the guests are here during that time frame.
And again, the link for those tickets for the open day tours is on the website. Is there a button on the front page, Danielle?
So the button is on programs, one-day events, and then you'll see open day tours.
Okay. And next, workshops.
Yes, so we have a number of one-day workshops coming up in July. We have 2 sessions of a floral arranging workshop on Saturday, July 18th. So there is a morning session from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., and then there's an afternoon session from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. And our garden team will be leading the workshop. They'll be utilizing flowers grown here on site in our cut flower garden, as well as grown at our biocultural conservation farm. And they'll be leading kind of an introduction to floral design that really honors Mrs. Mellon's aesthetic in floral arranging.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to go ahead with a few of the other workshops we have coming up. So we also have a workshop by Hilary Waters Fail, who is a really incredible textile artist. She's the head of the fiber department at VCU, and she's leading a workshop on Saturday, July 25th. And the class will be making lavender sachets. So making small little bags of lavender to put in drawers and places to smell nice. And they will also be making cyanotype prints onto those textiles. So that will be a super fun workshop. And Hillary is a really lovely instructor. And that will take place in our basket house, which is a beautiful building that displays some of the baskets collected by Mrs. Mellon. And it looks out into the formal garden. So it should be a really lovely day for all involved.
And as always with the programs, there's deadlines for applications too. What's the latest update on those, Danielle?
Yeah, so the deadlines that we have coming up would be the deadline for our cultural and natural ecologies class taught by Amy Myers and Teresa O'Malley. So that is a deep dive into looking at early colonial works in the library collection. And that will be a residential short course that we host here in September. The deadline to apply to that course is on July 6th. And then on July 26th is the application deadline for our 2027 plant science and plant conservation biology sabbatical program. So our sabbatical program is for plant researchers who are mid to late career, and they live on site for about 2 to 3 months. They interact with our residents, attend the meals, and then they also receive a $15,000 grant. So the application for that is open again until July 26th.
And the website page for that would be under programs, would it, for the applications?
Yes. So the application for cultural and natural ecologies will be under programs and then residential short courses. The application for our sabbatical program will be programs. And then I believe there's a tab for sabbaticals right there, and that will lead you to the link to apply.
Now, you have some interesting news, too. This is, I think, a new initiative, isn't it? The quilt utilizing collection that you've initiated?
Yeah, we're very excited about this project. It's been a long time in the coming, but in March we hosted 12 quilters who came for just a couple of days to be inspired by our site, learn about Mrs. Mellon's textile collection, after which the quilters all went home and submitted proposals of a final quilt that Oak Spring will commission. So we selected 2 of those proposals and announced those via social media on Instagram. And the 2 winners are Sherry Cifaldi Morel and Inex Mercado. So both of them will be coming here quite soon in June, and they will be collecting some of the textiles from our collection that they will then take home and make into quilts that we will have back with us and accession into our collection sometime around February of 2027. So we are so excited that Sherry and Inex will be creating these wonderful quilts, and we can't wait to see their final creations.
It's a wonderful idea, isn't it?
Yes. Mrs. Mellon had a large number of textiles, and this feels like a really beautiful way to utilize some of those scraps and textiles to create new artwork.
Wonderful. Well, I think that wraps it up for this month, right? Looking ahead to the rest of the 2 summer months, really, because we soon get into the fall and a lot more announcements to come, as always. But remind everybody, Danielle, before you leave, how they can find out all of this information on our website and social media handles.
Yes, the best way to know what's going on about Oak Spring is to subscribe to our email newsletter, which can be done by going to our website, osgf.org, and right there on the homepage you can enter your email address, and we send out updates about every month to every 6 weeks, sharing short courses, workshops, lectures, everything that we have going on. You would find in our newsletter, and then you can also follow us on Instagram. And you can also find us at X, and on our social media, you can get day-to-day insights about what's going on here at the garden, and sometimes see some small behind-the-scenes snippets. So that's also a great way to stay in touch and know what all is happening here, because there's always something new.
There really is, and I highly recommend following on Instagram, because that is, it's all about images on Instagram, but it really does give a full picture of all the events that are happening here, some behind-the-scenes shots as well, and I love the Instagram account that you've got, Danielle. It really does keep you up to date with what's happening there.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, good job. Well, of course, if you are listening on any podcast, don't forget to hit the follow and subscribe button, as well as on YouTube as well. And be sure to share this with anyone that you think might enjoy the show too. I'll be back next month with another guest here on the Oak Spring podcast. But for now, thank you again to our guest, Dr. Sylvain Cordier, and to you for listening.